A man who swiped into a murder trial. Prosecutor, Os. And when she tried to leave, he couldn't handle it. He couldn't stand the thought of her moving on. So he took her to a place where no one could hear her scream and... Defense attorney.
Objection! The prosecution is creating a fantasy. There is not a shred of evidence to support this narrative.
Judge.
Sustained. Mr. Davies, you will stick to the facts, or you will sit down.
The camera holds on the defendant, Ashford Hayes. His face is a mask of calm, his eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the courtroom walls. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't even blink. Welcome to Sleepy Echoes Unwind, where the night remembers old stories. Light your lanterns, slow your breathing, and let us drift together into the hush of the night. The town of Veridian, South Carolina, is a place practically drowning in its own history. Spanish moss hangs from ancient oaks like decaying lace, and the summer air is so thick with heat and humidity, you feel like you could wring it out with your bare hands. It's a town of old names and older money, where the past isn't just a memory, it's a ghost that haunts every corner. This is the world Ashford Hayes was born into. The Hayes family was once Southern aristocracy, their name etched onto the town's oldest buildings. But after generations of bad luck and worse decisions, they were little more than a name, a family of ghosts rattling around in a decaying mansion. And into this stagnant world walked Clara May. She was a breath of fresh air, a transplant from up north with a bright smile and zero patience for Veridian's suffocating traditions. She met Ashford Hayes the way so many people do these days, on a dating app. For 2 months, they were a picture of modern romance against a gothic backdrop. He was the quiet, brooding local. She was the vibrant outsider pulling him out of his shell. It was a storybook romance, right up until it became a horror story. Section 1. The Lover's Leap. Just outside Veridian, there's a rocky outcrop overlooking the languid Blackwood River that the locals call Lover's Leap. It's a spot steeped in tall tales of tragic romance, and it was here, on a suffocatingly humid August morning, that a pair of hikers found Clara May's body. She was at the bottom of the bluff, her body broken, the life gone from her eyes. Suspicion didn't just fall on Ashford Hayes. It crashed down upon him. He was the last person to see her alive. He admitted they'd driven up to Lover's Leap the night before to talk. He told the police they had an argument, a small one, he insisted, about her feeling smothered by the town. He said she decided to walk home to clear her head, and he drove off, annoyed but not worried. He claimed he went straight home and went to bed. But the scene seemed to tell a different story. Near the edge of the cliff, there were signs of a struggle, disturbed earth, a broken branch. And back at Ashford's house, Clara's purse and keys were still in his car. Why would she walk home in the dark through miles of dense woods without any of her things? The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered. The local sheriff, a man who had known the Hayes family his whole life, looked at Ashford with a mix of pity and resolve. The evidence was circumstantial, sure, but the story? It was simple, damning, and in a town that runs on gossip, it practically wrote itself. The fallen prince and the girl who wanted to escape him. Within 48 hours, Ashford Hayes was arrested and charged with the murder of Clara May. Section 2. Weaving the Net. The investigation, led by lead detective Miles Corbin, moved with chilling speed. Corbin was a man who saw the world in black and white, and he'd already decided which side Ashford Hayes was on. His team started piecing together a version of the relationship that painted a very dark picture. They pulled the text messages from Clara's phone. Read in the harsh light of a murder investigation, Ashford's words seemed to twist into something sinister. "Where are you? wasn't a question, it was a demand. Call me became an order. I need to see you felt like a threat. The prosecution would later show these texts as the desperate pleas of a controlling man terrified of being abandoned. But the key to their case came from Sarah Jenkins, Clara's best friend. In a tear-filled interview, she told Detective Corbin everything he wanted to hear. "Clara was scared of him," she said, her voice trembling. "He had this intensity, this darkness. She told me she was going to end it." Corbin's questions carefully guided her memories. "Didn't he seem angry to you, Sarah?" he'd ask gently. "Didn't Clara say he had a temper?" These weren't just questions, they were suggestions, planting seeds of certainty in the fertile ground of grief and fear. Sarah, just wanting to make sense of the senseless tragedy, latched onto them. Her vague feelings of unease about Ashford hardened into concrete memories of menace. By the time the investigation wrapped, the narrative was solid. Ashford Hayes, the last son of a decaying dynasty, had grown obsessed with Clara May. When she tried to claim her independence, his obsession boiled over into rage. He drove her to Lover's Leap, and in a final, desperate act of control, he pushed her from the cliff's edge. It was a simple, brutal story of love gone wrong, and the prosecution was sure a jury would buy it. Section 3. The People versus Ashford Hayes. The Veridian County Courthouse was its own monument to decay. Paint peeled from the massive columns, and the air inside was stale with the ghosts of 1,000 other trials. As the summer heat baked the town, the trial of Ashford Hayes began. The prosecutor, Daniel Davies, was ambitious and sharp, and he knew a high-profile conviction was a ticket to bigger things. He stood before the jury and laid out his case with all the gravity he could muster.
This is not a complicated case, he began, his voice echoing through the courtroom. This is a story as old as time itself. A story of a man who could not possess the woman he desired, and so he chose to destroy her. Over the next few days, you will hear how Ashford Hayes manipulated, controlled, and ultimately murdered Clara May. His star witness was Sarah Jenkins. On the stand, she was the perfect picture of heartbroken conviction. Looking the jury right in the eye, her own eyes welling with tears, she delivered a devastating testimony. "He was possessive," she stated, her voice firm. "He needed to know where Clara was all the time. In the last week, she told me she felt like she was suffocating. She said, 'I have to get away from him, Sarah. He scares me.'" Under Davis's gentle questioning, Sarah recalled conversations in vivid detail, her confidence unshakable. The jurors leaned forward, captivated. You could see they believed her. This is something psychologists call the confidence paradox. We are hardwired to trust a witness who speaks with absolute certainty, making it nearly impossible to tell a true memory from a false one that just feels real. Next, Detective Corbin methodically presented the evidence. He blew up the text messages on a large screen, highlighting Ashford's most demanding words. He detailed the crime scene, emphasizing the so-called signs of a struggle. He described Ashford's demeanor during his interrogation as cold and unnervingly calm. "In my 20 years of law enforcement," Corbin said, "I've never seen a man so devoid of emotion after the death of a loved one." With every witness, the net around Ashford Hayes grew tighter, and he just sat there, impassive, his expression impossible to read. To the jury, his stoicism didn't look like shock. It looked like guilt. The prosecution had painted a masterpiece of motive and opportunity. All that was left was for the defense to try and smudge the lines. Section 4. The Unraveling. Ashford's lawyer was Benjamin Carter,
a local attorney who had seen more than one powerful family rise and fall. He was older, and he moved a little slower, but his mind was as sharp as a shard of glass. He didn't try to match the prosecutor's theatrics. Instead, he just began to quietly, methodically pull at the threads of the prosecution's story. He started with Sarah Jenkins on cross-examination. His tone was gentle, almost paternal. "Miss Jenkins," he began, "you've been through a terrible ordeal. It's understandable that your memory of certain events might be colored by that emotion." He then walked her back through her initial statements. "On the night you first spoke with Detective Corbin, you said that Ashford seemed quiet. But today you testified that Clara called him angry. Those are very different words, wouldn't you agree?" Sarah hesitated. "Well, I mean, she was upset. It felt angry." Carter pressed on softly. "Felt angry? Or was angry? Miss Jenkins, did you and Clara's other friends discuss the case before you gave your official statements to the police?" "Of course," she admitted. "We were all devastated. We were trying to understand what happened." "So you all talked, shared memories, pieced things together as a group?" "Yes." This was the crack Carter was looking for. He was subtly showing the jury how co-witness contamination happens, where people's memories can merge and reinforce one another until they become a shared story, one that isn't necessarily true. Carter's next move was to call an expert witness, Dr. Alistair Finch, a forensic psychologist specializing in memory. Dr. Finch took the stand and delivered a calm, academic lecture that basically dismantled the very idea of a perfect witness. "Memory isn't a video recorder," Dr. Finch explained. "It's a reconstructive process. Every time we recall an event, we're not playing it back. We are rebuilding it. And that process is incredibly easy to contaminate." He explained how leading questions from an investigator, the misinformation effect, can actually implant false details into a witness's memory. He wasn't calling Sarah a liar. He was doing something far more effective, explaining that she could be a completely honest witness who was, at the same time, completely wrong. The jury was visibly unsettled. The prosecution's most powerful witness was suddenly unreliable. Then Carter pivoted, opening a door the prosecution had fought to keep shut: the history of Veridian itself. He began asking questions about the town's other powerful families, specifically the Whitmores, a name that carried even more weight than Hayes. The prosecutor shot to his feet. "Objection! Relevance!" "Your Honor," Carter said calmly, "the defense intends to prove that Clara May's death had nothing to do with a lover's quarrel, and everything to do with a secret she had uncovered. A generational secret this town has buried for 50 years. The judge, a woman who knew the town's history all too well, leaned forward, her interest clearly piqued. "I'll allow it, for now. But you're on a short leash, Mr. Carter." Section 5. The Ghost on the Stand. The air in the courtroom shifted. The simple story of a domestic dispute was cracking open, revealing something far more sinister underneath. The climax of Carter's defense came with a witness nobody saw coming. He called an elderly man named Silas Blackwood to the stand. Silas was in his late 70s, his face a road map of wrinkles. He'd been the groundskeeper on the estate next to Lover's Leap for over 50 years. In a quiet, halting voice, he told the court what he saw on the night of Clara's death. "I was locking up the shed," he said, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Heard a car coming down the old service road. Fast. Too fast." "And could you see this car, Mr. Blackwood?" Carter asked. "Saw the taillights. It wasn't Mr. Hayes' truck. I know that truck. This was a big, dark sedan, a Lincoln, the kind old man Whitmore drives. Prosecutor Davies jumped up.
Objection! The witness is speculating.
I ain't speculating, Silas shot back, his voice suddenly firm. I know what I saw. Carter then asked the one question that mattered. Mr. Blackwood, if you saw this, why didn't you go to the police? Silas looked down at his worn hands. The law in this town ain't always been for folks like me. My father told me, you see something that ain't your business, you keep your head down, especially if it involves the Whitmores. The room fell silent, but Carter wasn't done. He presented his final piece of evidence, Clara May's laptop. His investigators had recovered her deleted files. Because Clara May wasn't just a bartender from up north. She was a freelance journalist, and she was working on a very dangerous story. She was investigating the 50-year-old disappearance of a civil rights activist in Veridian County, a cold case everyone knew about, but nobody ever talked about. Her research, displayed for the jury, pointed to one horrifying conclusion. The activist had been murdered, and the man responsible was the patriarch of the Whitmore family. Suddenly, those text messages from Ashford took on a whole new meaning. Where are you wasn't possessive, it was worried. Another message read, you're getting in too deep. These people are dangerous. We need to talk. Their argument at Lover's Leap wasn't about him being controlling. It was about him begging her to drop the story before it got her killed. He was trying to protect her, not from himself, but from the ghosts of Veridian's past. And Clara, fiercely independent, refused to listen. When she walked away from his truck that night, she wasn't walking home. She was walking to a meeting from which she would never return. Section 6. The verdict. The jury was out for 6 hours. 6 hours where it felt like the entire town of Veridian held its breath. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric. Ashford Hayes sat beside his lawyer, his composure finally cracking, his hand trembling. Across the aisle, the Whitmore family, who had attended every single day of the trial, sat like stone statues in the back row. Finally, the jury filed back in, their faces grim. The forewoman handed a slip of paper to the bailiff. She wouldn't look at Ashford. She wouldn't look at the Whitmores. The judge read the verdict, her voice echoing in the dead, silent room. On the charge of murder in the first degree, we, the jury, find the defendant, Ashford Hayes, not guilty. A gasp swept through the gallery. Ashford slumped forward, burying his face in his hands as months of suppressed emotion finally broke through. Sarah Jenkins stared in disbelief, confused and betrayed. And in the back row, the Whitmore patriarch's face was a mask of cold fury. He'd been exposed, not in a court of law, but in the court of public opinion. And all his power couldn't stop it. Ashford Hayes was a free man, but the truth was still a fugitive. The conclusion. So, Ashford Hayes was acquitted, but you could hardly call it justice for Clara May. The people truly responsible was shielded by decades of power, wealth, and fear. Her murder was just absorbed into the town's dark folklore, another secret buried under the suffocating weight of Southern Gothic decay. The courthouse in Veridian still stands, its columns peeling, a silent testament to a justice system that can be just as haunted, just as flawed, and just as broken as the people who pass through its doors. Epilogue. The cost of truth. The courtroom had emptied hours ago, the echoes of the verdict swallowed by the heavy summer air. Outside, Veridian returned to its slow, suffocating rhythm, cicadas screaming in the trees, porch lights flickering on one by one. Ashford Hayes declined interviews, declined celebrations, declined everything. Instead, he drove. Not back to the decaying Hayes mansion, not to town, but down a narrow dirt road that twisted through the woods toward the Blackwood River, toward Lover's Leap. He parked at the overlook and sat in the truck for a long time, engine off, hands resting on the wheel. The night was thick and moonless, the kind of darkness that felt alive. Finally, he reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small object wrapped in a handkerchief. Clara May's phone. The one police never found. Ashford turned it over in his hands, thumb brushing the cracked screen. He hadn't powered it on since that night. Hadn't needed to. He already knew what was on it. He stepped out of the truck and walked to the edge of the bluff. Far below, the river slid past in black silence. "I tried," he murmured to no one. For a moment, it sounded like a lover's apology. Then his voice hardened. "You just wouldn't let it go." He powered on the phone. The screen flickered weakly to life, illuminating his face in a ghostly blue glow. Notifications flooded in. Weeks of missed calls, messages, alerts from a world that had moved on. He opened the audio recorder app. One file, time-stamped the night she died. Ashford pressed play. At first, there was only wind. Footsteps. Clara's voice, distant and irritated. "Stop following me, Ashford. I need space." Then his own voice, calm. Too calm. "You don't understand what you've done." A pause. "What I've done?" she snapped. "I found the truth. Someone has to..." A sudden scuffle. Gravel crunching, her breath catching. "Ashford, what are you doing?" Another pause. Long, heavy. Then, very softly. "If you publish that story, they won't just destroy you." Wind roared across the microphone. "They'll destroy everything. Ashford!" A sharp cry, cut off. Silence. The recording continued for several seconds, capturing nothing but the endless rush of air over the cliff's edge. Ashford stopped the playback. His face showed no emotion at all. Below, the river kept moving, indifferent. Headlights appeared behind him, sweeping across the trees. A black sedan rolled into the clearing and stopped. Not a Lincoln this time. A newer model. Cleaner, quiet. The driver's door opened. An older man stepped out, posture rigid, suit immaculate, even in the heat. Whitmore. He approached slowly, like a man greeting an old acquaintance rather than someone acquitted of murder. "You kept it," Whitmore said, nodding at the phone. Ashford slipped it back into his pocket. "I wanted to hear it again." A long silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken history. "You did what needed to be done," Whitmore said finally. "For her, for yourself, for this town." Ashford laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "No," he said. "I did it for you." Whitmore didn't deny it, didn't confirm it. Just stood there, hands clasped behind his back. "The arrangement still stands," the old man said. "The Hayes debts disappear. The estate is restored. Your family name survives." "And Clara?" Ashford asked. Whitmore's expression didn't change. "Clara made unfortunate choices." The cicadas fell suddenly silent, as if the woods themselves were listening. Ashford stepped closer to the edge, looking down into the void where her body had been found. "She trusted me," he said quietly. "Yes," Whitmore replied. "She did." Another long pause. Then Ashford reached into his pocket, removed the phone, and tossed it into the darkness. It vanished without a sound. No splash reached them. Whitmore nodded once, satisfied. "Good night, Mr. Hayes."
He returned to the sedan. The engine started, smooth and expensive.
The car disappeared down the dirt road, swallowed by trees and shadow. Ashford remained at the cliff's edge long after the sound faded. Finally, he whispered into the darkness below, "I told you they were dangerous." He turned and walked back to his truck. Behind him, unseen in the brush, a small red light blinked steadily. Recording. The story shows just how thin the line between memory and reality can be, and how easily a confident witness can be a mistaken one. Thank you for joining this moonlit journey. What are your thoughts on how memory and power collided in this case? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to light your lantern and subscribe for more stories that explore the complexities of our justice system. For now, blow out your lantern. We shall meet again.